my book, I was testing it all the time. And when I remember there was one person who's playing in this tournament right now who kept refuting my analysis. And that was Gawain Jones. And I was following his games and he would just like demolish my ideas against the Karen. I was like, not fair. I have to go back to my... So I literally had to scrap like weeks of analysis and work harder. But it made it a better book. Yep. Thank you, Gawain.
And the only way to test your opening analysis is to play it against the best in the world.
Yeah.
So Hans, there, it would have been really interesting to see how Duda would have reacted to that opening. Instead, we see one of the main lines of the English here, white gaining space, black gaining space as well. White was actually attacking the black knight, but black counter-attacked against the white knight this time. And we'll see these pieces traded off there. Hans finally appearing with his fresh new haircut. And, OK, a trade of knights, a trade of pawns. Black's queen coming out early, but the black queen will maybe be a bit of a target for white's pieces over the next few turns. White's bishop move there, not as common as occupying the centre with the pawn or bringing the white knight out, but still relatively standard stuff so far. And we talked about troubled pawns, double pawns. White has double pawns on the c-file, but actually they're quite strong. They control the middle of the board. They control some central squares. So these types of double pawns are probably the best type you'll ever see. They're not great at the best of times, but for now, it's OK. And Hans looking confident, for sure. He's studied this. He's not just studied the Jabava London, of course. He's studied a whole bunch of openings. His openings lately, the teenager, only 18 years old, they're super strong. He's won a few games already in this tournament out of his openings.
And talking about openings, I have a question from Charlie Hill. And this is in reference to the last game that we saw from Jordan. And he says, how long do you think Jordan, but in this case could also be Hans Niemann, will have been preparing the opening for? And do you think he has practiced it online without showing people he is preparing it?
Very good question. That's one thing I always do, at least, if I'm about to start playing a new opening that I'm not so familiar with, at least in practical terms. I don't have too much experience, then I'll always play online a bit first. Firstly, to make sure I actually like the positions, because on a computer screen, if the computer says +1, it might look great, but if you sit there and you don't know the plans, then you might not enjoy it so much. So that's one thing, but also learning what the most common replies are from your opponent in those opening stages. So, yeah, I think these guys, they're very professional. Hans might only be 18, Jordan's only 21, 22, but they're opening experts. And that's why Jordan, for example, was invited to Magnus's camp, because he checks everything really deeply with computers. He plays lots of practice games in his openings, and that's why the results are so effective in tournament play.
Yeah.
And I should, of course, mention Jan-Krzysztof Duda has had quite a nightmare day. He's lost all his games today. He started off in shared second place, and now he is in 8th place fighting for qualification. Wow, that is such a bad day for him.
Yeah, and especially because at least yesterday he was really starting to gain momentum, and we've seen him be a bit inconsistent on the Champions Chess Tour. Last season, playing in the finals, but maybe not quite at his best. And this year, OK, needing to recover, because he really is expected, a World Cup winner, to make it deeper into the knockouts. Meanwhile, just to catch up with the position, black is the first to castle the king, but white has that opportunity at some point over the next few moves. And I'm surprised the evaluation bar is so far on white's side, but it must be to do with the fact that black queen is vulnerable to some attacks over the next couple of turns. And maybe we can jump in just to show what Hans is thinking about right now. I think he just needs to castle as quickly as possible, get that king to safety. And once black continues the development, for example, OK, this knight not doing anything, these queenside pieces asleep. If the knight moves out onto a very natural square, then white can start thinking about, for example, pushing a pawn forward with ideas of bringing his bishop out and hitting this black queen. It's all about this black queen. Black needs to spend a few moves, keeping her safe, maybe even having to spend a move now just to stop this bishop jumping out. It would be too strong. But Hans, OK, going his own way, he's very creative. Instead of castling, he first flicks in this queen move, hitting this pawn in conjunction with the bishop. This pawn moved, but I mentioned this was maybe a move black wants to play anyway. This pawn move stopping white's bishop from using the square later, white's knight from using that square. And finally, we do see the white king castle itself away to safety. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of this move. I think the queen could have maintained her flexibility and maybe more priorities. The priority should have been to open up the centre, and black's trying to clamp down on that idea by pushing his pawn forward. So it's all about the tension in the center. Can White push his pawn to the middle, or is Black got this square too well guarded? White would love to open things up, but maybe not possible right now.
All right. Well, Jan-Krzysztof Duda, you mentioned, World Cup winner. He is ready to play in the candidates tournament this summer. The winner will face Magnus Carlsen in the next World Championship match. But news today, Sergei Kanyakin has been banned from chess for 6 months by FIDE. And we have a new story on this on chess24.com. This, of course, brings a big question mark about what will happen. He is qualified for the candidates tournament. Will he be able to play? I mean, probably not, because it's inside 6 months. So who will take his place?
Well, that is the question, isn't it? And I think I saw some stats that if Ding played 26 games by the end of May, he will be able to play the candidates.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so I read the story that the regulation is that the highest rated player in May will get that spot. Right now, that is Ding Liren. He is world number 3. World number 2 for Russia is already qualified. So, but Ding hardly plays because of COVID. He's not able to travel from China. And Levon Aronian, he's playing the World Cup, the Grand Prix, starting tomorrow. So he could catch up with Ding on the rating lists.
Yeah, either way, that article on Chess24 is fascinating.
Yeah.
It looks like Karyakin won't appeal either. So, yeah, that place has opened up. And I know chess fans, they would love to see Aronian or Ding, both of them amazing players in the candidates. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting summer and finding Magnus Carlsen's next challenger.
Yeah, definitely. So go ahead to chess24.com to read all about that story. And Jan-Krzysztof Duda, he is, however, ready to play in the candidates. Now, a few moves in the game.
Yeah, a few moves. And White's last move, a decent one, but it does maybe highlight the fact that White's queen has lost a bit of time. The White queen started on the D1 square, of course, and she kind of moved to C2, then moved again to the E2 square. It could have gone there in one move. Hans has lost a bit of time over the last few turns, and that's why the evaluation bar is bang in the middle. White's advantage of the first move has been negated by the fact that Hans lost a tempo, as we call it in chess, and the queen moving yet again. The third time she's moved now. She could have got here in 2 squares, maybe, in 2 moves. So, okay, meanwhile, a trade of bishops. Black's bishop just retreating there. The one thing that White has to be careful of long-term is that the doubled pawns don't become an issue. In the endgame, they might be a weakness, they might be a target for the opponent. And also, if it comes down to pure kings and pawns, no pieces on the board, then double pawns have no flexibility to march forward. That's why we talk about them as being so bad. That's why in the Queen's Gambit, it gave the main character nightmares, apparently, these double pawns. But for now, there's enough pieces left. And the one thing Black has to be careful of, in the meantime, is not allowing White's pieces to get too active. At the moment, it's fine. White's piece on the bottom row. The rooks look okay, but the bishop not great. And okay, talking of activity, Hans is going for it. He's full of confidence, as we've seen before, and he's going on the attack, similar to how Jordan did it in the last game, using this pawn as a battering ram. He wants to advance again, next move, attacking the Black queen, opening up lines. But this time it's more risky because the White king also sits on this side of the board.
Yeah, I do wonder whether he felt like positionally he was going in the wrong direction, actually, because there were a lot of things that potentially could be a big problem in the long term. So therefore, he's like, OK, let's speed things up, let's accelerate the play and let's initiate chaos. Because this is a tricky move to actually deal with because, you know, like you say, you know, another pawn is perhaps going to launch itself, harry the h-pawn, move it 2 squares. The White king can step up. Maybe the 2 rooks can swing across to the right side. And, well, Duda just reacts very principally, actually, because they say when your opponent starts working on the wings, you should focus your energies in the centre.
And they might lose some momentum on the wings if they are distracted in the centre. And from the centre of the board, you can kind of go off on both sides. So right now, Hans just taking another move out to just improve his bishop, attacking one of Black's pawns on the c5 square. That pawn is undefended. I'm being surprised, I must admit, on every single turn. White started this plan of maybe launching a kingside attack and then just took a time out to improve a piece. So it's slightly inconsistent. But then again, Black does have to deal with a threat against his pawn on the c5 square. He does guard it. And notice how the Black queen does guard the knight on the c6 square. White's queen eyeing that piece up. But for now, everything holding together for Duda.
Yeah.
And Jovanka, is now the time to go on the attack and continue pushing pawns. You mentioned it, like when you have long-term weaknesses like white does, these double pawns on the left side, you need to counter often with dynamic, fast play.
Yeah. I definitely think now is the time. Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted because I saw this amazing tweet just now, and it's really, really bad news for David. And I'm really, really sorry, David, to be the bearer of bad news. But the person who won the Tinky Winky...
Sorry, that was a move, and I've just got the analysis board up. So before we talk about Tinky Winky, I was just saying white should attack the black queen, and I think he would have a great position. Hans, though, playing a bit too slowly. Carry on, Jovanka. Tell me about what my fate is.
Your fate is, it is Christopher Gressley, the owner of the Goodnight, who has won the Tinky Winky costume. And he's saying, so, Askill Breen, how do you want this served?
Christopher, I'm going to get my revenge.
I mean, it should just be part of the Goodnight exhibition, right? Yeah. This is the costume that David wore. Don't you think?
That is.
And everyone can try it on and take pictures of themselves in the costume. You know, it'd be like that.
Good
so, David,
idea.
I'm trying to save you.
Okay.
Good idea.
We'll see.
And talking about Christopher, actually, also, I know he's the guest in the next episode coming out about in the not Good Night, but Late Night podcast with David and Askill. And being the owner of a chess pub, he must see a lot of Tinder dates, is my bet.
Yeah, and that's one of the topics, actually, of our podcast to be released soon. But actually, just recently, we did release an episode with Jovanka and with Simon Williams. So, yeah, there's right now on Chess24, there's an article about those podcasts. Go check it out on Spotify. It's a lot of fun. And Christopher, of course, full of great stories. I wish I could tell some now, but it's too early in the day.
Yeah.
So, OK, meanwhile, as mentioned, white's attack is brewing. White did indeed push a pawn forward, hitting the black queen, but that pawn was captured. And now white, Hans Niemann, has a big, big decision to make. Does he go and recapture this pawn on the g5 square with the white knight or with the white bishop? The white bishop attacks the queen, but the queen will just move. It's a temporary thing, only a one-move threat. If the white knight captures, it is placed on a very good attacking square, a very strong attacking square. Either way, I think Jan-Krzysztof Duda, facing this attack, wants to trade the queens. He knows that white has the long-term weakness of doubled pawns, so if black's queen, if it sidesteps to the g6 square next, it's going to eye up white's queen in the centre. A queen trade only favours black. So it's very much short-term white's chances versus long-term black's chances right now. And still in the balance. OK.
Hans Niemann, he had such a great first day. Some bad results after that, but he's still inside top 8. It would be a big deal for him to qualify for knockouts, right? He is one of the lowest rated players here.
Yeah. And also one of the youngest as well. We mustn't forget that he's still a teenager. Yeah. And I was checking out his performance in recent years, and his star is really in the ascendant. You know, maybe two years ago, he was around about international master rating. And now look at him.
Yeah.
He's competing amongst the world's elite. So it would be an incredible achievement, actually, for him to qualify. But I don't think it would be an incredible achievement in his eyes. I think for him, he's very confident. So I think he'll be like, well, yeah, of course, I'm a great player. And that's such a great thing in chess, that you have to be confident in your abilities. And, well, we see bishop takes pawn, attacking the queen. And I do have to reinforce David's point, which I really love. You know, when you have the strategic trumps, and Duda has played it, try to swap off queens, neutralize the initiative, and then in the endgame, you can start to make use of your opponent's structural weaknesses.
Yeah, now with the queens off, it's going to be quite one-sided traffic, I feel. White is still solid for now. Everything's protected, but long-term, the doubled pawns have no flexibility. They could be targets for black's pieces. Black also has the advantage of just 2 pawn islands. If you look on the right side, black's pawns are connected there, left side connected. White has isolated pawns on both sides of the board, both the H pawn and the A pawn isolated. So long term, it's all about black. It's just about whether black's pieces can get organised to actually attack those weaknesses. And yes, just while you were talking about Hans, he was actually, at the beginning of the pandemic, he was known as mostly for being a streamer. He was streaming day in, day out, constantly. He had a huge following online, but he's kind of let that take a back seat now, and he's focused on his playing, and that's really paid off. in this tournament in 4th place so far. But yeah, against someone like Duda, usually he would be struggling. I think it's all about Duda's confidence today after losing 3 games.
Yeah.
Because normally I think Duda would win this position 8 times out of 10 maybe, just because it's so stable, so long-term. And I think against someone as energetic as Hans, White's position is just going to be so hard to defend. But it's all about confidence. And Duda, if he's impatient, the advantage could fizzle out maybe. So.
And our odds oracle or stats oracle, Ty, sent me a message saying that Duda's odds to qualify dropped from over 98% to 64.8% with those 3 losses. You can never feel safe in this format. Never, ever. Remember, there is 3 points for a win, 0 for a loss, 1 point for a draw.
Yeah, and I mean, it shows how well Duda did earlier in the tournament.
Yeah.
He lost 3 in a row, and he's still just inside the top 8.
That's true.
But yeah, that's why we're focusing on this game. It's so critical for the standings, for the qualification.
Yeah, and also will be critical for how Duda actually feels about today's chain of events. Because the funny thing about chess is you could lose the first 3 games, but if you win the 4th, it doesn't quite matter. You know, you're just like, oh yes, yeah, you know, I've won a game, excellent.
Ending on a high.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and now you can go on to the 4th day and you'll be feeling great.
Yeah.
If he draws, perhaps a good position or something, then it will just feel like this is just a terrible day of chess and, oh my goodness me, what am I doing? And then he'll have to reset and work very, very hard to be in the right mindset for day 4.
Absolutely. It's all going to be decided tomorrow, the 8 players that will qualify for the quarterfinals. And not many are feeling safe. Liam Le, I think, is feeling quite safe. But wow, look at that. In his game against Ding Liren, the bar all the way over to Ding's side. That could be Liam Le's first loss in the tournament. And we did see a rook move.
Yeah, rook move, and it looks like the black king has just castled the king and rook next to each other. But nope, that rook has just swung across. And actually the idea, I think, is to start launching the black f-pawn down the board, maybe to attack the white bishop first, but even to push it 2 squares. That black rook is actually a bit controlled. It wants to find an open line, at the moment struggling to do so. So Duda just staying flexible, and meanwhile Hans evacuating his king from any potential kind of openings of the position so that the black rooks could face that king. Often kings are good in the centre in endgames once the queens have gone. And maybe the secondary motif is that white's rooks now are ready to just swing across to the g-file on the same line as the black king. And just defend things there, challenge the rooks there. And OK, there we see the stockfish evaluation. The computer moves. Wow, Duda finds the best move. I was going to say the top 3 moves, all very natural. It's not clear which one's best, but Duda, of course, plays the best move. Notice how they're just lining up their rooks with the opponent's kings.
Yeah.
If in doubt, that's often a good strategy to scare the opponent, but also tactics work in your favour if rooks are opposite your opponent's kings and queens. So, OK.
Okay, I'm taking notes.
Yeah, Niemann, he's going to get his king out of the way. It's just too uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Oh, he isn't. Wow.
He doesn't.
Surprising.
Brave.
Well, he does the same, right?
Yeah,
His
he does the
rook
same
aiming
instead.
for that black king. Now, what would you be thinking in this position, Kira, even if you were white or black? What would you prefer, maybe? I mean, the bar now, all the way to...
Definitely, I would prefer to be black here.
Yeah.
But I think this is a very tricky game. But I mean, Niemann he went too slow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because he had so many opportunities on the G and the H lines, but then. And you said it also. He used a lot of time to try to improve a few small things.
Yeah.
And now he's no, definitely this is Duda's game.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the thing, you've got to be consistent, right? And he pushed a pawn, and then he took 3 or 4 moves just to improve his pieces. And he allowed black to just trade queens. If he'd been a bit faster, that opportunity might not have existed for Duda. And actually, if you notice what's happened, we've just seen a trade of pawns. White's king now firmly in the middle of the board. But those isolated pawns, those doubled pawns, on the c-file for white, they're extremely vulnerable. Duda has exchanged off the pawn next to it, so now those pawns are very loose. They lack defenders, and already I'm seeing dangers with the white king. If you look at all of the white pawns, actually, white has 2 isolated pawns on the right side and 3 very weak pawns on the left side, sorry. And OK, advancing this pawn now, but there's not going to be an attack against the Black King. The Black King is going to be safe once queens have been traded. And yeah, as you mentioned, I think it's very one-sided. I'm surprised the evaluation bar is actually only 1.5, because it feels like the type of position that could just fall apart if white is careless in just one move. And
Wow.
yeah, it's already really, really dangerous times for Niemann.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe regretting not playing the Jabava London system, his
Yeah.
speciality. Switching openings and maybe just not being familiar with the pace, with the plans. And yeah, Duda, meanwhile, looking very focused.
And the bar is over to Magnus Carlsen's side in his game against Gawain Jones. As we mentioned, Ding maybe about to win against Liam Le. And the bar is over to Ju Wenjun's side in her game against Eric Hansen. Maybe her second win of today. As you said, Jovanka, it's starting a trend.
Yes, and that's what we want to see.
Yeah.
You know, we definitely, I mean, she's the 3-time women's world champion, so she's a very, very strong player. And she definitely must not be underestimated. And I'm trying to figure out how Black is going to break through. So this, I mean, I really love Black's position, but I'm really thinking, how should Black proceed? Should Black try to improve the pieces? I mean, I've been thinking about moving the king out of the eye line of the white rook, or maybe try to improve the dark squared bishop.
Yeah, Black's dark squared bishop a bit ineffective right now. This piece not really hitting anything, just thin air on this diagonal. But I think maybe your first suggestion, Jovanka, is slightly uncomfortable, right? This tension, we mentioned it before, rooks opposite kings. There could be ideas, for example, if Black is too slow, of white's bishop moving in and creating a pin here, hitting this pawn in front of the king. So yeah, why not get it out of the way? When in doubt, just move your king to safety. That could involve just stepping off the file here. Could involve maybe stepping forward, but then you do risk, for example, knight jumps if you're too brave with the Black King. So that's what I would start with, at least. Just move this king to the side, and then as Jovanka also mentioned, next improve the pieces. For example, this knight could start attacking this weak pawn at the front. This bishop, for example, could at least, if it's not doing anything, trade itself off for this white bishop. Remember, this white bishop is stopping Black's access to the d-file, so why not trade it off at some point? I think this is just a nice, flexible move. And okay, he doesn't play this. Duda, he's known for being a very tricky player. And he's played a move that might be very good, but it also might be very bad.
Oh,
He's pushed the
oh
pawn
yeah, look
forward.
at that.
Yeah, and he's hoping that white captures this pawn. I mean, white wants to capture this pawn anyway. What is his trick? It looks like he's just lost a pawn for free because the pawn cannot recapture. This is a pin. His idea must be to slide his rook across. But what has he missed? Rook takes pawn is a check, and hitting the bishop. Let's go back to the players. Why can't white just take this pawn for free? Jovanka, I'm struggling.
I can't see it either.
What has Duda got in mind?
I mean, I was
White
thought
can just take
maybe
this pawn.
something clever, like pushing the pawn up one square, or maybe moving the king out of the way.
But then you've just lost a pawn for Black.
Right. Doesn't make any sense. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Why is there no reaction from either player?
But there, looking at the evaluation bar, I can see that White's is actually much, much better.
I mean, fair play to the players. They don't see the evaluation bar.
Yeah.
So Niemann now probably just, of course, his first instinct is, why can't I take this pawn? He's just delving deep. He's trying to calculate. Duda must have a trick in mind. Surely it's not just hallucination. Yes, he's had a bad day, but that is a very basic blunder.
Oh.
I'm struggling to explain it.
Strange.
It must be that he wants to slide his rook across. And Niemann doesn't call him out on the bluff. Niemann trusting him. And
It's mutual blindness. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Bishop takes pawn. It's like the most... Okay, I don't want to say obvious move, because obviously both players missed it, but it's a very logical move. The rook is opposite the king.
My only explanation, I think we have to jump back into the position in a minute, but my only explanation is that they stopped their calculations one move too early, because white could have won a pawn for free, maybe even two pawns. And yeah, we have to show it just because it's so crazy. White stepping back with a bishop, but now Black can just move his king forward. He still has all the long-term advantages we talked about, but bishop takes pawn, wins a pawn, as we mentioned. The only explanation I can come up with is that rook across looks like a double attack, hitting the white knight, hitting the white bishop. So two pieces under fire, but after rook takes pawn check, the king doesn't want to go to the corner where it will be in the eye line of the white bishop. It needs to step to the side. And maybe here they both stop thinking, okay, two pieces are under attack. It's too chaotic. And white can't go for this because, indeed, if white captures this bishop, for example, then after rook takes check, the king moves, the rook can recapture the bishop and actually black emerges with an extra piece. But what they must have both missed is that in this position, rather than going, black attacking these two pieces, rather than going capturing this bishop, white could just move the knight first. The knight is the kind of immediate target, so move it out the way, actually threatening checkmate, hitting the black king. Black only has one move, you have to capture the bishop, but now you capture black's bishop, and after this, white has 2 extra pawns. It's just game over. Also, white threatening to bring the knight up with a nasty check, and also a fork hitting the black rook. I think it's this knight move that they both missed, and maybe we have to ask them about it earlier. This knight jump would have won the game for Niemann. Yeah, huge turnaround, but missed by the teenager. And that's why you should never trust your opponent, even if they're one of the best players in the world.
Yeah.
They're very human. They blunder as well. You can't trust them. You have to calculate as deeply as possible. And if we go back to the game position, finally, black's king is out of the eye line of this rook. It's found safety. And yeah, if Duda goes ahead and wins this game, if Niemann doesn't qualify now for the knockouts, he'll look back at that one move. Missed opportunity. And he did spend a minute or two, but it wasn't long enough.
Yeah, it was a golden opportunity. And I have to say, often you can find all these possibilities by sticking to the formula of calculating checks, captures and threats. And when we miss them, it's because we're not focused enough, or we're just not actually disciplined when it comes to this particular thing, because it will solve a lot of things. Because here, the threat was checkmate. And, be methodical. That's my big advice. And if you say, well, it takes a lot of energy, it's hard work. Well, this is where practice makes perfect, as we say. And just keep on training, keep on practicing on this particular thing, and you will get better. And in fact, you'll get so good, you just do it subconsciously.
Yeah. The other thing is not making assumptions. I've been there myself when I've played the strongest players in the world. I just think, OK, they must have seen everything. They must have calculated everything. Of course, they never make one move, simple blunders, but occasionally it does happen. You just have to work as deeply as possible. And yeah, once you've checked your variations, go back, retrace your steps and double check them, because you might see something new. And OK, now it's again all in black's favour. The knight, as mentioned, could come to the edge of the board and starting to attack white's doubled pawns. This has forced white's knight to be passive. Black's rook now kind of starts swinging across behind white's isolated pawns on this side. The black rooks could stay within touching distance of each other. Just find a safe square for that rook, and Duda has the advantage. It's still white's king as well, the more vulnerable of the two, despite the fact the queens are off.
It's kind of hard to read the body language of these players now, if they have sort of seen that there was a huge position in the position a few moves ago.
I don't think they've realised. Duda never kind of flinched. He never we've seen it before on the tour. Suddenly Magnus will react when he realises he's blundered, or a lot of players react, but Duda just stayed calm. I think he trusted his calculation, but there was a small hole in his plan. And yeah, Niemann, meanwhile, I don't think he would be looking back. He's the type of player to look forward, to be optimistic, to look for his chances. But OK, Duda making his move for the win now. This pawn stepping forward. If it steps further down the board, white's bishop is actually trapped. So there's a huge threat. This pawn, if it marches forward, that's game over.
Yeah. But I do have to say one thing, that blunders make for exciting chess. I mean, we don't like it when everything is perfect. Then go watch computers play. And I also really love it when everyone at home gets involved and sends us their thoughts, their comments, and their selfies. And talking about selfies, the big shout out goes to David Knopfler, singer-songwriter, also brother of Dire Straits founder Mark Knopfler, who is watching us from his sofa. So a big hello.
Oh, I'm getting starstruck.
I know.
Hi.
That's actually crazy timing, because when I was in the shower this morning, I was listening to Sultans of Swing.
I know that's your favourite song, David.
My favourite song. So.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that is so cool.
Yeah.
So David Knopfler is a chess fan.
Yeah. I mean,
cool.
I just love it that we have a whole variety of people watching the show. And I also am getting goose pimples. So thank you.
That is so cool. Wow, all right. Well, hopefully these two then puts on a show for David Knopfler following this game. And I mean, they are. It's a very interesting game. Do you think now Jan-Krzysztof Duda will win it?
It looks likely. Also, he's just gone one pawn up, so there were a few quick moves there. Remember, there was a threat to trap White's bishop. White's knight actually moved out the way, so White's bishop does have some escape squares on this diagonal. But in the process, Black was allowed to give a check, drive the White king back, and now the first of those doubled pawns has dropped. So Black has a 3 versus 2 advantage now on this left side. Also, look at all White's remaining pawns. They're all isolated. Long term, the more trades that happen, if the knights disappear, the bishops disappear, those White pawns are easy pickings for Black's pieces. And okay, also forced to retreat his bishop away from the attack from the Black knight. It's all gone wrong for Niemann. He's even left the board. He's just maybe not so in love with his position anymore. He knows for sure that Duda has this one in his grasp. And Duda happy to plant his bishop in the middle of the board, attacking the other White pawn on that c-file. One of them's dropped, the other under fire. And now if the White knight goes and captures this Black bishop in the center, remember, trades only help Black. Black's a pawn up and White's pawns are weak. And also if you compare the remaining pieces, if we see the White knight capture the bishop, Black's knight keeps the White bishop in its cage. It's dominant in terms of minor pieces right now.
And that's kind of an important question that everyone at home, and also myself, would be asking, you know, is it a good time to trade the bishop? Because after all, maybe you'll get bishop against knight. Maybe you can have hope. But it's so nice to hear, okay, no, just compare the pieces, and you definitely don't want to make those trades, and compare the pawn structure. And this will give you a little bit of an indicator as to what you should be doing in the future.
Yeah, I think White's last remaining hope is to go for some kind of surprise attack against the Black king, maybe using the White knight. I think any trades that happen, your chances of saving this game get reduced. And okay, he brings his bishop out to attack the Black rook. At least Black's rook now has to dodge this threat. Maybe it will slide across, give a check to the White king. But okay, this is what's needed in order to save a game in practical terms. You need to create threats, scare your opponent, put the fear of ghosts into them, and eventually they might slip up. They might be careless for a move, or they might overestimate your threats and go too defensive, too passive. Duda isn't that type of player. He'll look for the maximum, but either way, hands keeping pieces on the board, and that's the right defensive strategy.
Duda, our Polish player in the tournament, and well, Poland, Kira, that has been such an important country after the war hit Ukraine. They're just receiving a lot of refugees.
Yeah, they received 2 million now, and you can also imagine how many children has crossed the borders into Poland. Because I think it's very important to mention that again and again, that this is first and foremost a crisis for Ukrainian children.
Yeah, children crisis.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen it, how children has been bombed, how they've been injured, but also we've seen how it has affected the children. I just saw yesterday about children becoming catatonic and not able to talk anymore and things like this. And so imagine in Poland receiving all these children that need help.
Wow.
So definitely, it's a country that has. We need to support Poland definitely in order to tackle this.
Exactly, in receiving so many children. All right, a few moves on the board. Is it still winning for Jan-Krzysztof, our Polish player?
Definitely still winning for him, and I think he stumbled across a great plan for Black. He actually advanced another pawn in order to clear a path for the Black rook to come across and slide down. And the White king has to protect 2 isolated pawns on this left side, but it can't protect them both. The Black rook, the Black knight, the Black bishop, they're all actually pointing towards this left side of the board, going towards the White king, and there's nothing else for Hans to do. He needs to just forget about that left side. It's all going to drop, and he's going, at least with the White knight, to try and create some nuisance. But yeah, the problem is the Black bishop on the board now too strong, guarding the Black king as well, and those 3 Black pawns are going to win the game. They're not that far away from promotion, but also they have nothing stopping them.
Oh, it must be so nice in an endgame to have 3 connected pawns that you can just...
That's right, Kaya.
Yeah,
totally.
march up together.
You know, pawn structure counts for everything.
Yeah.
And as, in the endgame, it's all about promoting pawns as well as checkmating the king.
Yeah.
And of course, pawns work best if they're together and supported by another sibling. And I also have to mention, in this particular position, take a look at white's pieces, you know, the rook and the bishop and the knight. There's no coordination there. They're not pointing towards any target. And the knight and the rook could be working together, but look who's doing a sterling job of defense. That bishop in the middle of the board, it covers the g7 pawn, and there's just no way through. So, I mean, white has to be super creative here to generate any kind of threat. I'm not seeing anything. Are you?
I'm not seeing anything at all. Also, you're stuck. This rook actually creates a pin on the second rank, so this white pawn cannot advance. The white rook would drop behind it. White's king is kind of stuck in limbo here. It doesn't really want to continue moving forward. It might face some checks, some nasty checks. Also, it has to keep an eye on this black knight. But most important of all is now the players are down to around 4 minutes each. It's just easy for black to play. As you mentioned, these pawns are coming. That's a simple plan. Any Tom, Dick or Harry could come up with this plan of pushing pawns. For white, what do you do? And in rapid chess and speed chess, it's all about the simplicity of plans. In the end, white decides, OK, it's time to push a pawn, try to open up lines towards the king. But this is easily dealt with. You can even take this pawn if you want, or you can just step forward and block things up. Personally, I would probably just take that pawn off just to get rid of any potential threat. If you step forward later, this pawn might be a bit of a thorn in the side, and you can imagine it promoting later. So why not just get rid of it? And just capture instead. And I don't think this will help white at all, because after bishop takes, you can just continue your plan. And as Jovanka mentioned, this bishop is so strong, it stops any possible checks to the black king because it covers the square next to it. And OK, this move is strong too, just pushing the pawn forward. And white's knight is forced away. It's time to just continue advancing, and still no threats. No matter where you pick up this white knight, even if you have 3 moves with it, there's no check you can really make without being captured. So, yeah, still very, very much in black's favour. Thanks to these pawns, they're going to start marching forward very shortly.
Yeah, and I was desperately trying to see if there was one way for the white rook to mobilise itself. I mean, it needs a little bit of fairy dust just to kind of... and cheating, I'm going to say, to get that rook to anywhere useful. I mean, it's just not possible. Yeah. Every time the rook steps up the board to get somewhere active, well, there's just rook takes pawn, and all lines and all squares are covered.
Yeah, and black actually playing a sneaky move there. He could have just advanced his pawns, but Jan-Krzysztof Duda, very clever at just killing the opponent's fun, killing the opponent's counterplay. He's retreated with his knight, so that knight might be a defender, but also he's got out of the way of his own pawn, so black's c-pawn can now come down and give check to the white king. Wow. Hans Niemann, though, playing for tricks, he actually gave up his knight to lure the black king out of its kind of safe refuge there. Now the white bishop moves out the way. That's a discover check. White's rook hitting the black king, but the black king can just defend its bishop. So it was a double attack, a check, and black's bishop was hit in the middle of the board. But easy to deal with. And wow,
nice.
Yeah, just.
Why is that so nice?
He's ending the game.
I'm not seeing it.
He's threatening checkmate in one move. The black rook is just going to come behind the white king now, deliver the kiss of death, and that's checkmate. The white king's caught in a mating net, so he's just abandoned the white pawn. He's just forgetting about the white bishop. Checkmate is coming in the next few moves. The black rook sliding across, and this is a very common pattern. The black knight, supported by a pawn, and a black rook just needs to come next to the king, and there's no way out.
Is that the perfect team to deliver checkmate and to win a game?
Yeah, knights work super well with queens, especially because they do the only thing a queen can't, but with rooks in this type of position. Knights on outposts are just fantastic.
Would you find that checkmate, Kira?
What?
Would you find that checkmate?
No, I didn't see it before it came.
Good, then we're
I didn't either, don't worry.
But actually, I thought...